telling the truth is a revolutionary act. All right, y'all, welcome back. We are at episode 9 already, and I am very excited to have my great friend Billy from Permaculture Farms and the Permaculture PIMP cast. And before any of y'all get rabidly offended, PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion. Welcome to the podcast, Billy. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. It's a joy to be with you. You're like, you're my brother from another mother. And based on some of the conversations we've had offline, it's really astonishing how much overlap we really have. It's just a joy to be here with you and all your guests.
Well, you know, after you reached out to me and contacted me, I have been binging, 1 on your channel, on your YouTube channel, and 2 on your podcast. I love the dynamic between you and your son. We're going to talk about that as well. But there is an enormous amount of overlap, and we even used to be neighbors and we didn't even know it. And so there's just a lot of synchronicity here. And what I was hoping, I had the opportunity to listen to your podcast about your origin story. And that's one of the questions that you ask all your guests is like, every superhero has an origin. What's your origin story? I really felt that your story is so inspiring. And what we always try to do here is we try to offer solutions, and we want to inspire folks to achieve, to break out of the cycle of the rat race, and to really break out of the normalcy bias and outside of even the political paradigm to create, you know, one of the things that attracted me to permaculture, and you're very much into permaculture as well, is a Bill Mollison quote that said, permaculture is sedition, you know, and it's rather than trying to vote our way out of this or focus on the wrong things, focus on the things that you can affect and influence and do those things. And then obviously do it more and more until you see and you be the change that you want in the world. So maybe if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, how do you got to where you are today?
Yeah, before I do that, let me hit on what you just said a moment ago regarding Mollison. You know, there's so many people in the permaculture world. And when you bring up permaculture with people that have had some experience with it, let's say some of the people on the right, they typically think, oh, good night, man, it's going to be some purple-haired whatever. And if you read Bill Mollison, it's funny how people just kind of cut and paste what they think. Well, Bill Mollison also put as the prime director of permaculture, and I'm sure, and I know for a fact that you're going to resonate with it, and almost certainly many of your listeners, and that is the prime directive being take immediate control of yourself and your family. Be responsible, in essence, for everything they do and fail to do. So, yeah, right off the bat, that's what got me, you know, hook, line, and sinker, basically, to permaculture. But as far as my background, I didn't actually start in that. I didn't start in that world at all. In fact, I've talked about it, as you mentioned a moment ago. As far as my origin story, I was born in a little small town in Pennsylvania, not far from where you were, actually. And I mean, really practically a stone's throw from, and we were neighbors probably twice, by the way, back east and also out in Texas. So it's amazing how these things go full circle. But yeah, so I'm one of 6 boys to a mom and dad who decided when I was very young to believe it or not, as crazy as this sounds, to take all 6 boys on a road trip, cross country, robbing banks and KFCs while they did it, with all 6 kids in tow. So you got my dad would literally, he had a thing for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Back then they called it Kentucky Fried Chicken. It wasn't KFC. And he would come out of there with a bag full of money and say, oh yeah, the Colonel's been good to us. He'd have like a bucket of chicken and some money. So he had robbed KFCs, and they basically funded this lifestyle for almost a year, robbing places along the way, believe it or not, with 6 kids in tow. So yeah, so my and then just to give a background on that, my dad is basically the product of German immigrants, and my mom is part black, and part Blackfeet Indian. So a lot of people try to figure out what I am or what I look like. Well, that's what I'm the product of. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on there. So anyway, my brothers and I, all 6 of us, were raised in a small town in Pennsylvania by a grandmother who had recently been widowed at just about the time that my mom and dad got busted. And to this day, I can smell I remember going into the Army, I could smell when they put us through the gas chamber, the tear gas. It brought me right back to when I was 5 years old, and they tear gassed all of us when my mom and dad finally got busted. So anyway, they went off to the clink for a while. Here we are, 6 boys being raised by a single widowed grandmother, and we're very much on welfare. We never ate meat, or if we did, it was always organ meat. And we were very, very poor, but you didn't notice it when you were a kid, or at least I didn't. To me, it was normal. It was fun. It was a we didn't have a whole lot, but you didn't know that you didn't have a whole lot. And there were times where things were a little bit harder than others. And one time in particular, I remember I'm complaining to my grandmother about how we don't have things everybody else has. We don't have this, we don't have that, we barely do this. And she looks at me and she says, Billy, as long as we have each other, as long as you have your family, we're the richest people in the world. Now jump in the dumpster and go to sleep. No, I'm kidding about that part, but no, I had to lighten it up a little bit, but you get the point of it being is that mom and dad were off in the clink, and here we are being raised by a single grandmother. And that was my world. Well, finally, mom and dad got out. We ended up moving to Oklahoma. And now they were technically, we'll call them reformed. But if in that house with my mom and dad, and of course us boys, we put the funk in dysfunctional. It's funny how what you wind up thinking normal is when you grow up in that environment. So you don't realize you don't realize just how far out of whack you are and your life is, and how abnormal everything is. Well, in a nutshell, what I later found out, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but basically I had a mom, or have a mom, that was good night, man. We hated the weekends, despite what most people and the way they live. We actually hated the weekends because there was literally a switch that would go on in her brain. She would turn from somebody who was mildly pleasant during the week, and then when Friday evening would roll around until Monday morning, there was literally a transformational change. I mean, like transformational, like a whole different person. And it was a living hell being under that roof for myself and my brothers. Well, being the second to the youngest out of us 6, we had to deal with it longer than the others. Grew up through this. There was a lot of nasty things said to us, things like, I wish you were never born, and I wish I'd have gotten an abortion, awful, diabolical things that you would never say to a child. And believe it or not, and to the people out there, no matter how angry you get, when you say that kind of thing to a kid, even when they grow up, they still carry it on, even though it may, even though there's a level of forgiveness. Well, I'll be honest with you, later on, tolerated my mom for the longest time, and wasn't really a biggest fan of my dad because he allowed this to go on and didn't stand up for us. What I didn't realize until years later, and this is, years later, when I found out that my mom, while incarcerated, was almost certainly a subject in Project MK Ultra. And I got all the proof in the world. I won't go into any great details, but I am a consummate researcher, and I know as you are as well, regarding certain things. Well, the first place she was incarcerated, it was basically the home of Dr. Jolyon West, the guy who basically was in charge of the MK Ultra program in the United States. And then she was transferred to Oklahoma, to the very place where he was, once again, Dr. Jolyon West. And, so come to find out years later that all the telltale signs of someone having been destroyed and broken down through MK Ultra, she exhibited all those things. But by that time, she had utterly destroyed any vestiges of family that we could have possibly had. So being a person that came from that environment, believe it or not, it's astonishing that none of us boys, all 6 of us, none of us ended up in Well, in jail long term, we might have been thrown in there for assault and battery and destruction of property or things like that, but never any, by every statistical metric. Here I am, a kid of mixed race, came from that background. Mom's MK Ultra, dad's a lifelong criminal. And by every statistical metric, myself and all 5 of my brothers should have wound up in Sing Sing scrubbing dishes. But I mean, as it is, I got one brother who played for the NFL. I got another brother who is a very noted medical doctor. And, got all of my brothers. One's a lawyer. You got myself, and we're all across this spectrum. So at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I know this is a long-winded answer, but I want to make sure I don't neglect to point this out, that not having is no reason for not getting, especially even in the United States of Amnesia, where we see our freedoms falling like dominoes every single day. But still, as of this moment right now, and everybody else out there has the ability to say right now, I am this today. Tomorrow I'm going to be something else. And you and your family have proven also that you can do that. I've re-identified my life. I mean, I was in one career, moved to another, changed to another career, and then another, until I landed on something I absolutely found my passion in, which is permaculture, and teaching it, evangelizing not only what the good Lord has done for me by sending his son to die for my sins, but also, and secondly, or actually thirdly, trying to evangelize this sublime design science called permaculture. And that brings me into the acronym you see behind me, the Permaculture PIMPcast. PIMP stands for, as you said a moment ago, permaculture is my passion. And it is. Right after, following, what the Lord has in mind for me. And then also that passion is also behind, or at least permaculture is also behind what we do in terms of standing up for kids being used in child sex trafficking. So we got a lot of passions out there, and permaculture is probably third on the list. But anybody that came from a background like mine, and you don't have to be, I'm saying what I am and where I came from, for all those people out there that are thinking, I didn't have the best start. I wasn't given any land. I wasn't doing anything. Well, that's where you and I actually overlay, because both of us essentially started over from scratch, built it up from the very bottom. When you described to me on my podcast what it was like you rolling into Texas, that was exactly how we rolled into Oklahoma, and then how we rolled into Texas, how we rolled into Kansas, how we eventually rolled into North Carolina. I had to start over because I had made poor business decisions, teamed up with people I shouldn't have, and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I've had to start over and over and over again, but we still live in a place that if you have a good idea, a good mind, and most importantly, you're not afraid to put foot to butt and do that American work ethic, the sky's the limit. And I don't care how many times you start over. So sorry about the long-winded answer, but there you have it.
We needed the long-winded answer, because what it does is it abolishes and eliminates anybody's excuse, and that's what was so important. That's what's so inspiring about your story, is you took advantage, despite all of the challenges, all of the everything that most people would consider like devastating. There's many people that have a similar background and they wallow in it, and they embrace that cycle of victimhood, rather than breaking free from it. And you are a living experience of somebody that is just willing to take advantage of all the opportunities. And, the grace of God is heavily involved in all of this. We never want to discount God's working and what he does and how he richly blesses us. That's another reason why I appreciate your podcast and all your information. You always acknowledge God and the Lord Jesus Christ in your life, which is part of that solution. I mean, without Christ and without the saving grace of Christ, we can achieve whatever. And what's the point? Like, it doesn't even matter. So, part of the balance of life and doing all these things and achieving and having success, if our success is just temporal, I mean, what's the point? But if we are living a well-rounded, fully balanced life, it really, one, it honors and glorifies God, and it gives him all the honor and the glory, but it also helps us to be able to help more people and to be able to inspire more people, provide them with the information that they may or may not need, but just to provide them with the information that they could either, one, direct someone else to, or two, personally internalize and use themselves. And that's what's really neat. And that's really why I really love and enjoy podcasts. And I mean, you are the reason that we started this podcast, is you were encouraging me because of all the shadow ban and the chicanery and the fact that we have hit 98,000 subs again on YouTube for like the sixth time. I think we hit it a couple times today. But you know, we want to get this information out there. We want to encourage, we want to inspire people. The other thing that we want to do is we want to show a track record. You know, it's kind of funny because, you know, you made a funny video the other day about certain people that are homesteaders, whatever, and they're kind of manipulating the algorithm, and they're kind of, you know, they're perpetrating themselves as maybe something that they may or may not be, and they're taking advantage of the current circumstances and different things. And, you know, our hope and goal is to, one, we are very outspoken Christians, and we want to raise our children in a very, intentional way, on purpose, giving God the honor and the glory. And we are we are very old school or traditional or whatever. And there's a lot of people, you know, when you have 6 kids and you're traditional and old school and you homeschool, you know, oh, you know what you're going to do to your kids. You know, one, the first thing you get is like, oh, 6 kids. You know what causes that? Y'all need a TV and all that other stuff. But but you know, when you raise your kids like this, like, yeah, but wait and see. You know, all their kids are going to turn out weird, and they're gonna rebel and all these different things. And one of my goals is, one, to demonstrate our life. And show the consistency of it. And it's all by the grace of God. We desire to honor God. We want to practically practice Scripture and the Bible, and we want to show the blessing in that, and we want to illustrate that. And you know, that's why I really appreciate y'all and your channel. And you know, here you have your son and daughter-in-law that are active. Y'all are still together as a family, you know, and this is what we're trying to create, is this generational legacy. And maybe you could speak to that from your perspective and from your family. Now, I had the most incredible childhood. You know, I had a mother and father that stayed married. My dad passed a couple years ago. My mom's still alive. They loved each other. They loved God. They served God, and they served us kids. So I can't even remotely relate to your backstory, even though it's still inspirational to me. But coming from your background, and then, you know, in essence, repairing a lot of the brokenness that you experienced, but being able to repair that and carry it forward with William and his family. How do you all see that as far as the legacy and moving forward?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Early on, I got a lot of things wrong because having not seen, I mean, not only was my family highly dysfunctional, everybody else around us, where I grew up in Oklahoma, by and large, their families were every bit as dysfunctional. So it's amazing what you think is normal. And then I had never really been in the company of what anybody would call a normal family, I'd say, until I met my wife and her family. And then I'm realizing, whoa, hold on, you guys get together for holidays and you don't fight. There's no arguments. There's no this and that. You guys get along just fine. Now, the conversations where her family comes from would only go so far. I mean, it would never delve into anything that even you and I would talk about. And
yep, I understand.
yeah, it would only go so far, but at least there was harmony. At least there was peace. So the first thing I had to do is undo all these years of what I thought was acceptable communication And I made colossal mistakes early on, not knowing, not being aware of any of these tools. So first things first was, okay, recognize that you got a problem. Try to get your parenting as right as you possibly can. And like I said, notwithstanding all the mistakes, I mean, the Lord has still blessed me beyond anything I could ever imagine with my son. Because I'll be honest with you, brother, the only thing you, me, any of us are going to leave behind on this planet. Yeah, I plant a lot of trees. I've done a lot of, I like to think I've done a lot of really great things in terms of farming, in terms of other things, in terms of instructing and teaching. But the only thing I'm going to leave that's worthwhile on this planet is my progeny. And I mean, really, our posterity, that's why I even said it in the preamble to the Constitution. We do ordain and establish this Constitution. Well, you go through the whole preamble, but he talks about with the posterity and everything, for secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And our posterity is the most important thing that we're going to leave behind on this planet. So, first of all, realizing that I was in that matrix. Like everybody else, I thought, this is the American dream. This is what I need to be shooting for. And then realizing in 2008, in the most profound way, that what they call the American dream is really a nightmare. You find yourself saddled in debt and all these other things that really don't amount to a hill of beans. Never was, and just did it as a rote mechanical response to the world around me. Meanwhile, in my head, the whole time knowing this is no way to live. So sometimes the days of darkness have a way of making you see the light. And 2008 really did it for me. That was the demarcation point for me, for sure. I was already awake concerning other things, but really, really, really came out of the matrix regarding most things at that point, and realizing, having been out of work that whole year, I was like, man, if I ever get myself back on my feet, because the only jobs I could find were in third world countries. And I'm like, if I ever see myself to the other side of this, I will devote everything I possibly can to getting myself out of this matrix, which meant also training my very young son at that time that this is no way to live. What they tell you the American dream is really a lie. And then from that point, really before that point, but really put foot to butt on that point at that time. So when I got myself back on my feet, I'm like, okay, everything they tell us that is worthwhile is junk. It's garbage. The cars, the car payments, the house you can't afford, all that garbage. And, you know, you find out that the people that do those things, truly, man, those are the ones that are all hopped up on antidepressants. And I'm finding that the most joyful people I ever met in my life was when I was in the Army, and they were in third world countries. So are they actually first world and we're third world? I mean, is it actually swapped? Because those were the happiest people I ever met in my life, and they were mostly subsistence farmers. So when I started coming out of this matrix and started looking at the work of people like John Taylor Gatto, realizing, okay, this whole, and I know you know the language I'm talking about here, realizing that this whole Prussian education model is really, this compulsory education model is garbage. Okay, got to get rid of that, or got to get myself out of it. Also realizing I got to train myself in the trivium and the quadrivium, realize some classical grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and then how to pass that on to my son. And then I think the last part, filling it up, is realizing, and this helped a great deal, reading the work of Robert Kiyosaki and people like him, a lot of Dave Ramsey, and where it was applicable, and realizing everything I know about money is wrong. Everything I know about everything is wrong. So realizing that this construct, this matrix that we've prepared for ourselves, or better still, this matrix that the powers that shouldn't be have prepared for us, I'm going to find myself descending and staying very comfortably at the bottom of Plato's cave if I don't put foot to butt, get my head right, get my family right, get my son right, and then put him off in the steps in which he should go. So to get back to your question, when he was graduating high school, because at that point he was already far enough in it and he had learned enough at the kitchen table, hearing me talk and hearing his mom talk, to realize that, yeah, you know what? Like the Bible says, raise a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, like everybody else, he went wayward for a little while and then found his way back. but then realized, okay, I got this full ride scholarship to college for an academic scholarship. And then he was about a month into it and then realized, okay, I got a Chinese teacher trying to tell me that Mao Zedong was a really good guy. Well, before that time, I already had him. He had already known by heart how many people Stalin murdered, how many people Pol Pot murdered, how many people were murdered by Mao Zedong, how many people were murdered by Hitler, and all the other people. And then, by the way, all the people that were murdered by the United States of Amnesia that nobody wants to talk about, whether it's false flag or whatever the case may be. He was already awake to all this, and he said, Dad, this ain't going to work. So instead of spending our money or using scholarship for him to go get a degree in worthlessness, we decided to self-fund an education where we would send him off to work with the very best in the world. So off to Australia he went, working under the great Jeff Lawton, the guy who did the Greening the Desert video. So he was his right-hand man for months. Learned all kinds of wonderful stuff, brought that back with us. We'd send him off to Joel Salatin, go work with him for a while, go send him off to the Earthship Academy. And then he went back to go green the high desert. So, and then now we sent him off to go work with Dr. Elaine Ingham to learn the best at soil science. So we sent our son off to be our emissary whenever we couldn't necessarily go anywhere. We basically got him a PhD understanding in being what I know. And this word is going to be profound to some people out there, but you're going to know what it means. And that is training him to be an autodidact, which is basically a self-taught person for the folks out there that don't know. This is what all the founding fathers did. This is what everybody until 150 years ago, when the one-room schoolhouse was intentionally moved from the United States of Amnesia, because what we used to produce in the United States was autodidacts. And that's exactly what we did, was essentially on the back end, give my son a classical education, have him become an autodidact, find out what his passions were in life, and then send him like a laser beam to get the very best training on this planet, to not only get that training, but to bring it back to his family and then graft it into what we were already doing. So basically, when you get down to brass tacks, I'll be honest with you, my son is essentially retired. When I say retired, I mean, I guess I ought to qualify that. When I say he's retired, he's basically out of the rat race in his, well, I guess you could say he's done that by his early 20s. And now he is a highly sought after consultant when it comes to permaculture. He's got more training and more experience than most people twice his age. And he's also, very adept at every single aspect of how to make this design science sing together. And he's still adding more in terms of his education, because instead of going off getting a mountain of debt, he went out there, got himself an education in what his passion was. And we helped to facilitate that. So here we are as an entire family doing this full time. Now, that's not to say that there may not. Now, I still am also a journeyman electrician. I still have other skills. I still have other means in which I make money. Of course, I don't tell everybody about, because the powers that shouldn't be would want to stifle somebody like me who doesn't feel muzzled. Well, they've already, like you, they've already put the sock in your mouth and mine, proverbially, on YouTube. You're putting out fantastic. When I first heard about you, I'm like, okay, who's this guy? I know doggone well they're suppressing him. Let's get him on the show. I got to have him. So I started binging your stuff, getting you on there. And then I come to find out we got so much overlap in so many different ways. And then also with our kids. So at the end of the day, another long-winded answer to what should have been maybe a short response. But the truth of it is, we tried as early as we could to get our son out of the matrix to where he can basically go into it when he wishes, but he's operating by and large, for the most part, outside of it. And that's what we fostered and encouraged. And so the way that went was, first we got my wife out. We got her out of the matrix first. So me and my son worked, and we put everything into the farm. Then we got him out. And then, like a platoon sergeant, I picked up the rear. Once we got enough put back, I was the last one to get out, and then it was full steam ahead. And we're like, okay, let's teach everybody what we know. And that's what we've tried to do. And we've had some good success with it so far. But we're also finding that, when you're on the YouTube plantation, or you're a sharecropper in the YouTube space, you're only gonna be able to go so far. And that's why I was like, good night, man. You got great information. You're a great communicator. So is your son, and he's a joy to watch also. And your wife. I'm like, dude, you really ought to start a podcast. And here you are, 9 episodes in, and you're knocking it out of the park, bro.
Well, that really wasn't a long-winded answer, because what you always managed to do is you answered a lot of the points that I had in here on my notes, because I think the way you vocalize it as coming out of the matrix, I believe what that means to me is understanding real history by reading real books, understanding real facts, real information. And that is one, that whole Prussian model is a brainwashing propaganda scheme. And then this whole entire right-left political paradigm that keeps you as that cog in the machine. Once you break free from that, and that's the beauty of this simplistic agrarian lifestyle. The one of the major things that my wife and I talked about, now we've hit the reset button more than once. And when we strategically relocated to Texas, that was a complete zero. I mean, that was a full reset. That was a hard stop. That was kick the breaker. You're starting back you're recharging from zero. And we've done that. And that speaks to the opportunity. That speaks to, if you put in the hard work, and God is still on the throne, and he is still full of grace and mercy and blessings. And he has completely restored us. We came here with 3 children. We have 6 children now. Before we moved, we had about 5 acres. Now we have 50 acres, and that's okay. Yeah, we work hard and do the things right, but that is by the grace and mercy of God. And we know that if we honor and glorify him, that, he will bless us. And it's not this prosperity gospel thing, but the thing, just like you were talking about, the books like Robert Kiyosaki, and understanding money and the money matrix and breaking free from that. Right. And the American dream of, the white picket fence and the dog and the cat and all, living in suburbia and all this stuff, when it's actually the opposite of that, and it's this slower, more simplistic, on purpose, agrarian, it's my opinion from experience. It's my opinion, having grown up in more of a very small neighborhood, almost a trailer park kind of, and then being on a little bit of land, and then getting out into the real country where it's open and you can't see your neighbors. It's my opinion that that's the way that life was designed to be lived. And that's the opportunity that we wanted for our children. We wanted the opportunity of, when you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you run outside in your bare feet, and the world is your oyster, and you can explore, and you can do all these things that don't involve a Black Mirror or a Fondle slab or whatever. And, you don't have to be in that matrix, that artificial, synthetic reality for most people. It's most people are stuck inside this synthetic matrix, like you keep talking about. And that's really been our goal, is to break all these paradigms and all these glass ceilings, and real history and real books are part of that. And, that's why I really enjoy your information, because you talk about all the time. And I know a lot of your subscribers to your podcast have been pushing you to discuss some real history. And so I'm hoping we're all going to pressure you into doing that. Now, as a content creator, starting a whole separate podcast, cut me a break. Nobody wants to see you do that, because that would be insane. But we do want to encourage you to push out some of that historical information. Me and you've mentioned a lot of great books, and then a lot of great authors like Anthony Sutton and Iserbeeth, and all of these, John Taylor Gatto, who bring us the truth that when you hear the truth, many times it shakes you. It's for usually your original response to the truth is like, that's crazy. No, that's, what is this guy talking about? But then as you continue to experience life and things happen, you're like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, wow, I kind of get what they're talking about. And so that's why your information is so impactful, because one, I really want to get into your composting information that you're putting out there, because the type of environment that we live in. We're in we have very dry seasons, and I really want to activate the soil, because that's all about water usage and increasing that moisture content so that the soil doesn't go aquaphobic. So you're preaching a lot of stuff that I'm very interested in. We have about 400 fruit trees planted here, and and it's funny because we've adopted this carnivore diet, and everybody's like, oh, well, what are you going to do with your fruit trees? I'm like, oh, the same thing. I mean, I love this stuff, and this is what life's all about. And we eat the fruit when it's ripe, and I love to graft and do all these different things. And so, yeah, that's not going to change. This is the stuff we do. And you're pushing out this kind of content that's right in my wheelhouse as far as a passion for me with trees and soil and trying to improve. And I call it my food 401k. And how awesome is that when you plant these trees, right? And then now with the information that you're putting out about soil health and composting and teas and these different things, where you can literally multiply the output, right? Just with a little bit of knowledge, so you have a tree that's performing poorly, and then with just a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of input, you can multiply the output so that your return on investment is that much higher. And that's why the information that we're trying to share and the information that you're putting out there is so important, because we're not just putting the information out there, but we're trying to illustrate it in a practical, non-curated way. We're not posing for photo ops, and this isn't, we don't use filters and different things we're not trying to create an illusion that we're something that we're not, but we're just trying to be very real. We're trying to bring the truth straight ahead. And at the same time, we don't want to depress you into wanting to commit suicide or anything like that. But for example, Sean Baker, he's a carnivore doctor, right? And today he said he was talking about this whole WEF thing. They're trying to encourage us killing off all the cows because they fart and different things. And this kind of information is important to shine a light on, because we can be self-sustaining and self-resilient and develop our community and raise our cows and eat our own cows. But if there's this gigantic clockwork out there that's trying to end that, to me, that's important to say, hey, no, this is crazy. And if you put the truth out there where enough people are like, yeah, what are they talking about? Like, cow farts are killing the planet, that eventually people will wake out of their stupor, or they'll stop staring at the black mirror or their fondle slab or whatever, and they'll actually do something or say something. And that's what I think is so critical about the information that we put out that is being stifled. So if we work together, we can help amplify the information and push it out through whatever means are available.
Bro, that's why I'm trying to shout as often as I can, and I will, what you're doing over there, because what I find astonishing about your family, and you're the leader of it, is the scorched earth policy regarding truth. You're not putting out children that are in any way going to be followers in the matrix. Prime example. Every time you go, pick any town, go anywhere. And some people are going to be offended by this, but since when do I care about that? I'm going to say it anyway. Go up and down every street, and what do you see? Everybody around you has an arm or legs, face these days full of tattoos. And if you go up and ask any of them about their tattoos, almost 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, well, they mean something to me. But
Yeah.
that's everybody saying it. So you have a world full of people that are engaged in this synthetic authenticity, which is exactly what it is. It's synthetic authenticity. You think you're being original, but really you're doing, look, I'll put it this way. Harleys weren't cool anymore when I saw 60-year-old grandmas on them. Tattoos ain't cool no more when I'm in the grocery store and there's an 80-year-old woman with tattoos on her arms and legs. You know?
Yep, that's true, man.
But everybody is going down that. Now, I'm not dissing anybody. When I was living in Oklahoma as a kid, I got a tattoo on my leg because it was subversive. When I went away to the Army and everybody went off to get tattoos between basic training and AIT, I was like, okay, it ain't cool no more. Everybody's doing it. I'm not doing it. So the point I'm getting at. Good night, man. It's hard for me, knowing history the way I do, to not be somewhat pessimistic about the trajectory we're on, because I know that from a historical standpoint, that there has never been a society this depraved that engaged in this level of depravity without the crucible of hard times. They didn't make it back until the crucible of hard times hit them. You can't find, now somebody corrected me once on my podcast. In fact, I had to give away $300 worth of butcher knives because somebody did find a crack in that armor. And technically they were right, but technically they were wrong. Because I made that same statement that no society that ever became depraved ever corrected itself without the crucible of hard times. Well, their exception was Nineveh. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, they still got dealt with later on. So does it really count? But they did for a time. When Jonah went there, said, hey, straighten up your act, or guess what? You're going to wind up in a bad way. They did for a time, but then they still got dealt with later on. Well, overlay that history to where we are right now in the United States of Amnesia, as Gore Vidal put it. You look around you, and I'm seeing a level of depravity that is undreamed of. And I'm about to be 52 years old. And I'm not that old, but imagine you're a World War II vet and you stormed the beaches of Normandy. You saw your buddies gunned down right there on the beach and you thought you were fighting for freedom. And then here it is, fast forward to where we are right now. And you got to be wondering, we died for this?
Wow. Yep.
You got to be wondering that. And then I'm sitting here thinking, bro, okay, at what point do we wake up? I thought, okay, when they come after our kids, people will finally wake up. Nope. They said, okay, well, your kids are mandated to put things in their bodies before we accept them back to school. And like lemmings, right on, did it. Nobody stood up. Nobody cared. Nobody did anything. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, what's the next shoe to drop? It's like there is no lie, no level of depravity, no lie the American can't be made to believe until starvation. Sadly, that's what history proves, that this crucible of really hard times. In fact, I'll give you a recent example. Okay, back in the 1920s, chicken in every pot, the roaring 20s as it was called. Then what happened? Stock market crash, and then we brought in what everybody knows to be the Great Depression. Well, that level of depravity that existed in the 1920s was replaced with what some people call the greatest generation. What created them? The crucible of really hard times. The people that lived through that depressive era, and then some of them that went off to war in World War II, got my opinions about what really happened there, but I won't digress.
Sure.
But what did that do? The crucible of really hard times produced what some people would call the greatest generation. I think I could offer a rebuttal to that, but let's just say they are. What made them that way? Adversity makes men, prosperity makes monsters, as you well know. Victor Hugo wrote that. And here we are. How long have we been prosperous? How long have we been down this road of depravity? How many people are comfortably chained at the bottom of Plato's cave and don't even want to know that the world around them is just a false reality? Well, the only thing that wakes people up, to get them out of that stupor, that make them nudge the person to their left and to their right in the bottom of Plato's cave and decide to break their bonds, is that crucible of hard times. So for all those people out there that are thinking, I mean, I'm probably going to aggravate a great many of them that are thinking, oh, we just get the right person in the White House. Oh, we just do this, we just do that. I got news for you. Prepare. What happened? What happened when, the Israelites, they kept screwing up, and then they were in captivity? What did the good Lord tell them? Build houses, grow gardens. You're going to be here for a while.
Right.
You're going to be here for a long time, It's going to be that way for a while. Well, when you look at the depravity, the modern day fires of Moloch are these abortion clinics and the things that we have going on. I already acknowledge, and I'm sure you would too, that we have a long-suffering Lord to deal with the things that we did. I can't even imagine what Sodom and Gomorrah must have been doing if the Lord has been this long-suffering with us. And I'm just waiting. I'm not saying I live in fear, because I don't. I know who I serve. And
that's right.
I know that whatever it is, at the end of the day, I'm to be a servant, like at the end of Ecclesiastes. All the things that Solomon could have said. What did he say at the end of Ecclesiastes? Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So if I'm living in accordance with that, and in accordance with what my Savior said, then I don't have to worry so much about those other things. But it doesn't mean I sit here and accept what's happening around me. That brings me back to you. So I am going to occupy until he comes, when he comes, or whether I go to meet with him. I'm not going to stand here and say, like so many people in my family, oh, well, we're going to get raptured out of here, so I'm not going to do anything. Or, the Lord's coming back soon someday. So, no, that's not what we're commanded to do. Because I got news for you. A lot of the people in that first century thought Jesus was coming back then, too.
Exactly. That's right.
Here we are. So should the Lord tarry, whatever the case may be, I got my assignment. That's what I'm supposed to do.
That's right.
And right now I'm trying to evangelize everything that's happening right now, to the point where, I'm trying to tap dance right on the edge on YouTube and say exactly what I think in the podcast space. And hopefully I didn't just get you blasted off into no man's land, because when I bring up some of these topics, they have a tendency to want to suppress them, as you well know.
No, this is my wheelhouse, and this is the kind of stuff that we talk about. And even the whole tattoo thing, it's kind of funny. Yeah. So just like you were saying, Billy, your entire line of thought is outside of this matrix, or outside of this modern America paradigm, which is where we have to be. One, God is first. If anything that we've seen our country really miss the mark on is this postmodern concept of we must eradicate and eliminate God, and that is the fundamental foundation of the starting point, starting with God and service to God, and then building upon that is like, well, how did God design men and women to exist with his creation, and this brings us all back to this slower, intentional, agrarian lifestyle. And it's so interesting, as God would have it now, in this postmodern world we live in, as infrastructures crumble and as food, we don't even know what's in our food. We wouldn't even know if we knew. You certainly can't trust a label, right? So this brings us all back around to what's really important. One, God is supreme. He is most important. Secondarily, our family comes second to that. And then after that, our life source, our food, like this is a very important thing. 80%, it was just a couple hundred years ago that 80% of our income had to be dedicated to either food, production or procurement or whatever. And that's obviously flipped on its head through this transnational high fructose corn syrup thing that we call the modern grocery system, right? But, you know, all part of hitting this reset button or avoiding, you know, the thing about God's coming judgment, right? And I know some people do think that there's this Willy Wonka golden ticket thing and we're all going to get sucked out of here before anything bad happens. I've learned through experiencing a little bit of life and studying the Bible a lot, as I don't think that that's going to happen. That's kind of Darbyism, and it's a very new concept that's occurred just in the last couple of 100 years. But, you know, one thing I do know is that God will protect you. God will shelter you. It doesn't mean that bad things won't happen. It doesn't mean that we won't be beheaded for the cause of Christ. But if you take the information that you're given and you acknowledge it and you apply it, there's blessing in that, you know, and that blessing will happen. Because God promises it. And that doesn't mean that you'll be driving a Rolls Royce or flying around in a G5 or G6, but it does mean, hey, maybe your children will grow up and carry the banner forward, whatever the future holds, you know, or you'll be able to eat healthy food and live a relatively healthy life. Because we don't, no man knows the day or the hour. We don't know when this whole thing's coming to an end. So we might as well use the information that we have and apply it, and not just stick our head in the sand and be, ignorant of it just out of some normalcy bias.
Bro, I couldn't have said it better. When you're talking about Darbyism, I'm glad you brought it up, and I hope you don't mind me breaching the subject, because I want to go a little deeper into that.
Sure.
Two things happened 150 years ago, and I bet money, I bet a buffalo nickel, you're probably aware of them both. And does it seem curious that they both happened at almost the same exact time? The first was, well, you know about the Plymouth Brethren, clearly. You know about Darbyism.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know about Cyrus Schofield, and who was a downright polecat, but, you know, you know, and then, of course, there were some, how do I say this? There were some interests from another faith that funded that Schofield Study Bible, and it was basically given everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, up until that time, I want to say two things happened at exactly the same time. The pre-tribulation rapture and the removal of grammar, logic, and rhetoric and the one-room schoolhouse happened at exactly the same time. And I'm supposed to believe that's a coincidence, because what, in a nutshell, classic, back in the old days, it was considered, I gotta give something of a historical lesson here. If you were a Roman slave, the first thing, if you purchased your freedom, the first thing you were required to do was purchase an education in what was called the trivium. It stands for 3 roads. That was grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And then later on, you were to purchase a education in the quadrivium, which was a more advanced way of doing it. No need to get into that right now. But the reason is that without that knowledge, it is easy for someone to hoodwink you. But slaves were not allowed to be taught this. Well, up until that 150 years ago, it was common knowledge, especially in the South, that this was taught to everybody. And, you know, it worked out really, really well. Well, the problem was it worked out too well. So eventually what we ended up getting into was a situation where, good night. These people know a little bit too how they know too much of how to think for themselves. So at the same time, James Nelson Darby and all the others, 150 years ago, we get the Schofield Study Bible. 150 years ago, we get the one-room schoolhouse basically deleted from American culture, which has basically led everybody down this path to believing anything that's officially told to them.
Yeah.
All of us. I mean, every single one of us have been brought down this path, and most of us have no understanding or even the slightest hint that this is happening. I know I'm moving around here a little bit, bro, but this computer's about to die. I had no idea this thing was on its last leg. I'm trying to plug this thing in.
Oh, that's okay.
So hopefully, oh shoot. Oh man. Bear with me, bro. Okay.
That's okay.
Apparently that ain't working. So I only got like 4% of anything going on here. Are you able to?
Oh, okay.
So yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on.
That's okay.
This thing just, I mean, all of a sudden, bro, it went from, this is a brand new iPad for the most part, and it went from 30% to 5% the second I started talking about this stuff. How about that?
Wow. Yeah, that's how it works.
30% to brand new iPad, 30% to 5% the second we started talking about that. That's why I started freaking out. I'm like, hold on, dude. I know exactly how long this thing lasts. So
yeah,
here we are once again, 30% now to 4%. Because I started talking about these things. I'm not going to say what it is for sure, but sure is funny that every time you and I get together, we got some weird technical issues happening. Just a coincidence. Just like 150 years ago, the Schofield Doctrine and the one-room schoolhouse were eliminated from the American. How about that?
Well, since your battery is going to inhibit you, I guess we're going to have you back on. So
I'd love that, bro. And obviously, I'd love to get you on there and talk to my audience about this, because honestly, it's one thing for them to hear me talk about these things. It's entirely another, because everything I said, I know you already know. And this is common knowledge because you and I both have drank from the same faucet of information when it comes to most of this stuff. So when they hear that it's not just me shouting this from the rooftops, it kind of it makes everybody aware that, oh shoot, maybe I might want to look into this.
Yeah, that's why it's powerful. That's why I wanted to have you on. I wanted you to tell your story, your origin story, and that's powerful. And then this information is very powerful because it breaks the paradigm. It breaks these conceptual constructs that have kept people confined inside a control paradigm. And until you break out of that, I mean, there's not a lot that you can do for yourself or that anybody can do to help you, because you're controlled. And that's why this information is critical. And we would love to have you back on, Billy.
I'd love to be back on. I mean, bro, they're going to pull the plug on me here in a minute. I'm down to 3%, but I just want to tell everybody out there, wake up and smell the corruption, or you're going to fall asleep drinking the hemlock.
Well, that's it. So, well, I guess with that, we will close this out. Thanks for coming on, Billy.
Thanks so much
and
for having me,
we'll talk soon. All right, my friend. Stay fearless, my friends.